And yeah, let's get started in just a sec. We're going to start with Carolyn Royston, who's the Chief Experience Officer at Cooper Hewitt, just doing a quick intro, and then we'll take you through what's going to happen next. Carolyn, you're up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize we were starting.
Okay.
Hi everybody, and welcome. As Rachel said, I'm Carolyn Royston. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Cooper Hewitt. And I really would like to give a very warm welcome to the Cooper Hewitt's Interaction Lab info session on our open call for activating Smithsonian open access. I'd like to thank Verizon 5G Labs, who have sponsored this program and made it possible. We're extremely grateful and excited about this new collaboration and the opportunities it offers to open up the Smithsonian's incredible collections in a new way. So thank you so much. In a minute, you will hear from the team, including Verizon, Cooper Hewitt, and Open Access, who will share more about the open call and what we're looking for in your proposal ideas. Before I hand over to them, I wanted to quickly share a little information for you about Cooper Hewitt and the Interaction Lab, especially for those people joining today who may not be familiar with either of those things. So Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum is based in New York. It's part of the Smithsonian Institution and the only museum in the United States focused solely on design. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and empower people through design, and is achieved through exhibitions, programs, publications, online resources, and interactive technologies. Our collection is made up of over 210,000 objects spanning over 30 centuries and encourages visitors to explore design and tells the story of design's power to improve our world. In 2019, we created the Interaction Lab, which is a research and development program embedded in Cooper Hewitt. The lab is a lab without walls and is focused on reimagining Cooper Hewitt's audience experience across digital, physical, and human interactions. Since its fall 2019 launch, the lab has injected new ideas into the museum's work through internal workshopping and strategy, an extremely successful public program, series merging interactive design and strategy and museum practice, and a commissioning program that engages the design community as creative collaborators in creating the next wave of the Cooper Hewitt experience. So Smithsonian's open access, activating Smithsonian open access, which is the reason that we're all here today, is the lab's first commissioning program. And we're thrilled that it's a collaboration with the Smithsonian's open access team. Commissioning is one way that the lab invites creative and technology communities to generate ideas for tools and experiences that can be introduced at the museum. Rather than making a big bet on one project, we want to invest in smaller prototype projects to put a range of ideas in the hands of our users, excuse me, to assess which ideas show the most promise to develop and launch at scale. We're interested in expanding access to deep engagement with museum collections for people of many abilities and interests worldwide, not only to see what creators can do with open access collections, but also what kinds of experimental platforms and applications they can create for larger audiences to play, learn, and discover. So thank you again for taking the time to find out more about activating Smithsonian access today. I hope you enjoyed the session. We've planned to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions at the end, and we really encourage you to do that. Just to say that we are really looking forward to seeing your proposals and your brilliant ideas. So thank you again to Verizon 5G Labs for their sponsorship. And now I'm going to hand over to their project manager, Corey, who's going to take the reins. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everyone. Thrilled to be here, thrilled to launch activating Smithsonian Open Access Program. You know, at 5G Labs, just quick introduction to what we do. We create an ecosystem to kind of push the boundaries of technology through 5G, and we work with everything from small startups to creators, all the way up to large enterprises. And what we're really doing here is teaming up with the Smithsonian to understand how can we take this trove of 2D and 3D objects and again push the boundaries using technology to see what what the creators and the creative community can do with it. I think Carolyn really nailed it on the head when she said, how can we open up this platform? A goal in 2021 for Verizon and Verizon 5G Labs is to really democratize learning through technology. So very excited to see some of your proposals and understand how we can combine technology, design, and this mission to democratize learning and push things forward. So on behalf of Verizon 5G Labs, thank you for inviting me to the talk. Looking forward to your questions, and I'm having fun working with this team, so you will too.
Thanks so much, Corey. So I'm going to go next. So the purpose of this gathering is to share some more information from our side on what it is that we're looking for, to orient you all around some considerations that we think are important, and also to give you a chance to ask questions of us. So you'll hear briefly from me, then Ryan King, who's the program manager for Smithsonian Open Access, then Vince Rossi, who's the director of the 3D program at the Digitization Program Office at SI, Jamie Cope, who you won't hear from just yet, but who's here to answer questions, who is the lead developer in the 3D program, Corey Timpson, who is an experience designer who focuses on accessibility inclusive design, and then Kate Haley Goldman, a longtime museum consultant and evaluator who will share some tips on designing for museum audiences. We're trying to keep the talking up front to no more than 30 minutes so we can leave 30 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to make this brief. For folks on the panel, to keep time, I'm going to do a little jazz hands like this. You start going over time. So if people see me doing that, that's why. Thank you so much again to the support of Verizon 5G Labs. We are truly thrilled to be able to offer this opportunity openly and widely to folks who are already working with digital museum collections, and to those people who may not already be in the habit of experimenting with them. A few things to keep in mind as you're thinking through ideas for your proposals. And I'm going to start with the slightly more boring stuff just to get out of the way. So a note on eligibility. It's the person or business entity that's submitting the proposal who has to meet those eligibility requirements, which are that you're a US citizen or that you are a permanent resident. We really do genuinely hope that we're able to offer eligibility more widely in the future, but for this first open call, it was necessary for us to limit it to that. That said, if you do not meet those requirements, you can still submit a proposal as a member of a team as long as the submitter meets those requirements. Now the program timeline. So a couple of weeks after we announce the finalists, we'll kick off the build period. We expect prototypes to be complete right around the very end of May or beginning of June. We'll be finalizing those dates with those folks who we're awarding commissions to. And we'll plan to schedule presentation programs for mid-June to give us some time to get the projects hosted. On that note, you will have 10 weeks of build time, which is actually not so much. So that means keeping your ideas at a reasonable scale will help you be successful and will help to create a more credible proposal. We really, really love big thinking, and we also really love practical execution planning. So to get to the projects and more specificity about what we're interested in, we are interested in projects that use 2D assets from Cooper Hewitt's open access collections and 2D and 3D assets from across the Smithsonian's wider collections, which include Cooper Hewitt's collections. All of the assets, 2D and 3D, are available through the Smithsonian Open Access API, which you can find through our developer tools page. I'll put the link to that in the chat in just a second. Cooper Hewitt doesn't actually have that many 3D assets available under Creative Commons Zero license, unfortunately, but we do have a really incredible collection of textiles, wall coverings, drawings, and prints, and tons of 2D images of 3D objects for you to play with. We also really want to see proposals that offer a variety of different kinds of interactions that are different from a kind of passive looking experience. So what that means is, typically in museums, you look at a thing and you read something about it, or maybe you hear something about it, but it's really about looking at an object and learning about that specific object. We're really interested in other things. How can you as a creator give users of your experience the opportunity to use our collections to make things, or to draw conclusions, or create connections interactions between objects in the collections, and maybe even between objects in the collections and other ideas. I'm not going to go into much more detail here just because we've offered quite a lot of detail on the program website, but are very happy to answer more detailed questions later on in the program. And lastly, but really most importantly, it is super, super important that as you're crafting your proposal, you're thinking about your audience. This is one of the most important things that I'm saying, which is why I saved it for last, that we ask specifically in your proposal about audience objectives, and we really mean it. What is the purpose of the interaction you're proposing, and how will it have an impact on your audience? Why is that interaction well designed to have the impact that you're describing? I'm going to stop myself there. And just also for you all to know, we're going to be sharing a recording of the session online. We will also be sharing a transcript, and we will also be publishing some questions and answers depending on what comes up later. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan King, and thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, everyone. We're excited to have you join us today and for your participation in this open call. My name is Ryan King, and I'm the program manager for the Open Access Initiative here at the Smithsonian Institution. Open Access was launched on February 25th of last year with the goal of making the nation's collections accessible around the world. We released 2.8 million 2D and 3D media files under CC0 licensing, meaning they are unrestricted material put into the public domain, so they are free of copyright restrictions and can be used free of charge for any purpose, including commercial. That number has since grown to 3.1 million media files, in addition to 14 million metadata records. And I mention that because not only can you use the 2D and 3D assets, but you can also do some really fun investigations into the metadata and data science and data visualization parts as well. And all that represents over 174 years of Smithsonian staff created data, and all of which can be viewed at si.edu/open access. I'll be sharing in the chat in a second a slide deck that I encourage you to read through with more information and resources on Smithsonian Open Access, including our value statement, FAQs, and a rundown of all of our developer tools, including information on the Smithsonian Open Access API and our GitHub repo. A couple of notes. Through this project, this open call, we encourage you to use the Open Access API. And just a small asterisk, the Cooper Hewitt does have their own API, but the Open Access API is really what will be powering your investigations and your innovative projects. Also, we're still enhancing our API offerings and documentation, so we would love to hear your feedback on ways to make it even easier. So once again, we're really excited for this project and look forward to seeing the innovative ways you use the collections and data sets. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Vince, you're up next.
Hey, everybody. I'm Vince Rossi. I lead the 3D program. So my team focuses on leveraging a number of different types of 3D scanning tools to document Smithsonian collections. We work for all the different Smithsonian museums, so Cooper Hewitt and all the other 18 museums. So I'm here to answer any questions around 3D data or the topic of animation, things like that. And I do want to pass off to Jamie to give a quick intro and just briefly touch on Voyager, our 3D storytelling tool.
Thanks, Vince. So while this program that we're talking about today isn't tied to any specific software platform, we on the 3D team at the Smithsonian have developed an open source platform that's allowed us to open up our 3D assets to the public for learning and exploration. And we love to see how you could improve upon that platform or expand it as part of this call. The platform is a set of web components that we call Voyager, and it consists of a backend component that we call Voyager Story, which allows subject matter experts to add educational content to the 3D models. So they're not simply models that you're rotating and looking at. Currently, you can add annotations in 3D space. You can add additional text and image content. And you can also create curated tours of the models. Then we also have a front end component that's called Voyager Explorer that you can see on our site, 3d.si.edu. And that's the component that takes those curated experiences and presents them to end users. It also allows you to do some things like view cut-throughs of a model, measure a model, do some of those more interactive things that Rachel mentioned that are beyond just looking at the object and reading text about it. We'd love to see further expansions of that functionality. Some things that we've done in-house is we've added advanced capacity to do painting directly on the 3D models. And also we've integrated augmented reality into our web component. So those are a couple of types of advanced interactions that we have done, but we'd love to see other things like that. Our platform is open source, as I said. It's on GitHub. There's a link to it in the call documentation. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about the technical side of it, you can ask today, and I'm here to answer those, or you can reach out to us directly on our GitHub repo. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Corey, you're next. Corey Timpson.
Yeah, important distinction. Not very often there's two Corys on the same call. Hi everyone, I'm Corey Timpson. My business partner, Sina Baram, and I will be working on this project with you all as resources to the Interaction Lab. And that means, helping you along with your projects as well when it comes to inclusive design and accessibility. So just a couple points to sort of make up off the top as you're thinking about your submissions. Really think about inclusive design versus accessibility. And what we mean is, think about the vectors of human difference at the outset. Don't think about like this great project and then try and think about how to make it accessible, because then you're going to work yourself into a tough dilemma. So really think about inclusion and all the vectors of difference that is shared across humanity at the beginning. And that means ability, disability, but it means, any number of vectors of human difference. Another point would be to think about the ecosystem of inclusive design. Think about your content, how it's being developed. That means, using some of the built-in functionality of Word to see what the Fleisch-Kincaid reading level is so that you're not creating content that's at too high of a level. Think about how that content is being expressed through graphics and presentation. Think about the typography you're using, color contrast. Think about all of these types of things. So think about how you have an intention and the visitor has an intention, and you want to ensure those, or the audience has an intention, you want to ensure those intentions line up and we're not inadvertently creating barriers. So be really deliberate about the decisions you make and really careful across this ecosystem, your content, your presentation, your software, the semantics that are going into it. And if there's any sort of built environment, real world stuff, how are those implications also being inclusive so that everything comes together? Media production, are we using alt text and captioning? Are we using American Sign Language? Anything like that, any of these affordances that you're going to want to surface. So really be thinking about it. Don't let perfection get in the way of a job well done. So it's a cliche, but really we'll workshop through these things with you. We'll be here as resources to help you out along the way, and use us. That's what we're there for. And as you're going through your projects, we'll be only too happy to sort of help and guide you along and participate. So include us as early on as you can so that we are inclusive and not just trying to figure out, how to be accessible at the end. And that's about it.
Thanks so much, Corey. And just to say that we know that 2 minutes on each of these massive topics is not actually enough time to cover them, but we really just wanted to kind of plant a stake in the ground about the things that are important to us in this program and create space to talk more about it. So please do ask your questions. And if we don't get a chance to answer all of your questions, or if you have a question that's a little bit more specific to your situation, you can email that to the email address that I just put in the chat, and I will put it in the chat again. And next, we're going to pass it to Kate Haley Goldman, who is going to give us some tips about designing for museum audiences. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Rachel. Really excited about this potential here. And I know that we have a fabulous set of creators on this webinar. And I want to give you a little bit of background so that you can perhaps spark some really innovative pieces, some really original pieces that will work with these assets within the Smithsonian open access collections. And because we have such a diversity, I'm going to give a very 101 level of museums to some extent to help spark your thinking as you're thinking about ways to engage with the visitors. My role is typically to do that engagement with visitors. So I'm going to put up a couple of slides here just so that you aren't relying on my words alone. So first off, we want to talk about the motivation for visits within museums. And folks come to museums for a wide variety of reasons, and we'll start physically and move to online. So why people decide to go is different than what they hope to get out of it. People decide to go because they're traveling. They see it as a social experience and ways to spend time with family and friends. They go when they have someone from out of town, right? Aunt Marge is visiting and we're trying to think what to do, so we're going to go to the physical museum. Another key piece of going to a museum is that it is raining, that you have children or friends that you want to meet, and you're not going to go to the park. You're not going to take a walk outside. You'll go into a museum. Parents feel that they want to provide an educational experience for their children, and they want them to have fun and work some energy off, but also want them to feel like they're getting something cognitive out of it. And finally, people do have interests in particular exhibitions or programs when they go to museums, but that isn't the only decision-making factor. Similarly, we have very different decision-making factors when we're talking about being online. So online visitors, it's a different experience, right? You can visit a museum in 60 seconds and be gone again and never really see the institution, but might see something very deep within the collections, right? So it could be a very memorable experience, or it could be a very fleeting experience for some visitors. Some spend hours and hours there, and some are gone in 30 seconds. So thinking about that, we're balancing what might happen there. Many folks are coming to do school research or some sort of homework. They are also adults doing passion-based research and would love to get deep into collections, to examine things with collections, and to on that personal quest or professional quest to know more. We do have quite a bit of programming right now that much higher numbers than we've seen pre-pandemic for museum programs when they're online. I think the key piece there is that visitors, whether they're online or in person, want something unexpected at points. They want things that surprise, that delight, things they didn't know before. And thinking about that sort of balance of knowledge and magic for them is what creates these very compelling experiences. Why they go and what they hope to get out of it is very different. And this is more similar to being online and in person, and that visitors really do want learning. Learning is not a bad word when you're coming there. That's part of the goal. That said, that doesn't mean that learning is book learning that cancels out delight. There's some sort of mix in there about curiosity and interest. But they're also looking for other pieces. Sometimes it's simply to have fun. Sometimes it's to relax, both online and in person. And they want to be able to have that sort of shareable experience, right? And all of these are valid outcomes. And museums, especially the Cooper Hewitt, the rest of the Smithsonian, accepts that the idea is that a meaningful experience might include learning, or it might include something that is more emotionally based, more moving, more immersive. And so when you think about the types of things that visitors want to get out of this, think of a very broad scope of that, of what makes a meaningful and dynamic experience for someone interacting. And that goes for someone who is spending 5 hours researching something deep in the collections, right? What makes that meaningful, as well as someone who is having a more casual experience. Museums, for those of you that do not work in the field, are obsessed with social interaction. And that means different things when we're online, but I think that that social interaction is still very much there. And it's exciting to think about when you think about open access in a Creative Commons zero format, because the way things are shareable is very different than what we see in certain places. The reasons that museums are obsessed with social interaction is because it is a key indicator of learning. You are more likely to have learned something and retain it in long-term memory if you're discussing it or sharing it with friends. And that's a discussion online or in person. We look a lot at what people are talking about and with whom they're talking about it when we research museums. And then, like looking at photographs of your vacation when you come home, it creates a more memorable experience if you've had that social interaction. People remember conversations that they've had about museum topics or objects decades after they've had that conversation, if they've engaged with someone else around the content. Finally, there's several what one conference called the digital superpowers. These are things that we have felt that digital stories really add to the content. And those are things that digital allows museum content and collections at times to be more immersive, to give a sense of presence, that you're there with an object or a person. It allows us to tell more inclusive stories for content that was written in a different era and that may not be appropriate at this time. So it gives layering to these stories and allows us to complexify history, literature, ideas. It also allows that interaction effect so that you are able to interact with other participants and that the people at home are no longer passive looking the way Rachel is saying, but they can be engaged in the making and creating in different ways, the remixing and the conversations around that. Finally, digital offers timeline shift for many of the users, that we feel like you can move around in time and space that allows you to be present in ways that you wouldn't be otherwise when you're looking at an object in person, that the digital can add those aspects. Most of the institutions that I work with at this point in time are asking me about relevance, right? And so we talk a lot about relevance. And I think that that can give you interesting hooks for the types of projects that you may wish to create. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background in terms of how we're thinking of relevance in different categories. There's tools that can make things personally relevant to an individual and then make it more meaningful, but also can make things more culturally relevant, more historically relevant, more contemporarily, that connection to current topics, the connection to the virus at the moment, the connection to other things that are happening. But they might also be societal, right? That they're putting things in perspective in a larger framework of our world. And these aren't mutually exclusive categories of relevance, but it is, especially now, our visitors search for meaning and how we make meaning out of all of these different elements, these collections, these ideas, and fit it back into our world that makes it sticky for them, right? Makes that very much of an engaging experience. So these are a few just tiny topics that hopefully give you sparks for ideas, and we're really excited to see what comes out of this call for the types of things that we might be able to do. I'm going to stop sharing there, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Kate. Wow, everybody was so good with time. Congratulations to us. Okay, there are a lot of questions in the Q&A. So I am just gonna start at the top. From Jono, since the development timeline is quite short, is there an expected number or cadence to meet with all of you and or the other participants, like weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly? So there will be a cadence. We haven't established that cadence yet, and it will likely be substantially dependent on the individual and how much support, they need, we think they want from us. But yes, there will definitely be a series of work in progress reviews over the 10 weeks to ensure that everything is going all right, that we're giving you as much support as you need, and mentorship provided by Corey Timpson and his business partner, Sina Baram, who you mentioned, Vince and Jamie from the DPO, Ryan also. So you'll be seeing all of us. If you're a finalist, you'll be seeing all of us on a semi-regular basis. Yes. Oh, this is an interesting one. I'm just going to answer quickly. How do you intend to democratize learning while some areas are in digital poverty? That is a great question. And one of the opportunities in this project actually is to think about how, as a creator, you might be able to take assets from an API and make them into physical things that could be distributed in some way. So perhaps that's a tool for teachers to be able to, print out things or to, generate physical objects to distribute to their students who actually don't have access to digital things. I would love to see some proposed solutions that address the digital divide during this program, because we are definitely aware of it. And in the context of this program, we are focused on digital experiences, but that doesn't mean that you can't propose an analog experience drawn from digital assets. Let's see. How polished should the working prototype be, i.e. how close to large scale implementation should it be? I'm gonna just give a quick answer and then open it to folks on the panel to answer. So the working prototype should be able to be used by the public. In terms of the level of polish, it's sort of hard. It's hard to answer that in a general way. I would say that, it needs to be able to be accessible to the public and not be super broken. That said, we understand that there's like a large scale implementation reality. And certainly we don't expect $10,000 to be a production budget for a production ready piece. So I would say that, something that is stress tested such that it can allow what would be probably a lot of traffic up front and then less traffic over time, just because we will, be promoting it a lot in the beginning, but then obviously like traffic tends to taper off over time. Anybody else from the panel have thoughts on that? Cool. Rana, if you have more specificities about that question, please feel free to message us at the resource email that I'll put in the chat in just a sec.
There's several questions on physical at the museum versus digital in both.
Thank you. So the intention is for these to be digital experiences. If we, when the museum is open again, find an opportunity to make them physical or to in some way make them accessible in the physical museum, we certainly will. But the intention here is to reach a wide range of audiences with these experiences. So focus less or not at all on the physical and as much as you want on the digital. I'm gonna go with, so there's a couple of questions I think maybe, let's see. I'm just trying to go through. Would a feature or set of features that are part of a larger platform be of interest for this open call? Jamie and Vince, do you want to answer that? At least as far as Voyager is concerned?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, since this is kind of a somewhat compressed timeline for development, we do have our Voyager project, which is a fully functioning platform. And we would love to have additional features, advanced features, or ideas around that platform for sure.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm just like scrolling through these questions to try to see if I can combine things. Ryan, could you describe an actual project that's already been done, or a few actual projects that have already been done with open access assets, just to give folks a sense of what exists?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in the slide deck, I'll repost that link in a bit. There are a couple examples of just this past semester. We partnered with Parsons and their Masters of Data Visualization program. And the students for their course projects over the course of the semester used our Smithsonian Open Access API or GitHub repositories or just other data sources, CSV files, et cetera, from specific museums. And they parsed through the data in different ways. So they compared representations of gender or race within the collection and showed different gaps of those representations. There's one on conservation of avian species. There's one using the folklife collection, which just also kind of answers one of the other questions about 2D and 3D and the media types. For that class, the data was all pulled and the metadata itself was open access for that project through the API. However, the audio files aren't currently open access. So that's something we're be releasing other media types if there aren't copyright restrictions on them in the future. But for that class, since it was a educational fair use item, they were able to access it directly from Folkway recordings as part of the Smithsonian through there. But for this open call for something that is going to be public facing, it will be the items that are available through the endpoints and the queries in the open access API or via searching on the Smithsonian website with the open access filter tag there. So there were, most of them were done as kind of like web interfaces, et cetera, but some of them were meant to be like on iPads and galleries in those kinds of ways. We've also partnered with other tech firms. So I know, and Vince can speak a bit more to this with some of the fun things that Tinkercad and Sketchfab has done with our assets. We're also interested in seeing how things are connected and shared via different systems. So I know WikiCommons, the Wiki database, all kind of, as well as Wikipedia, have been plugged into pulling in our information and pushing some information back. So anything that connects some of those flows as well. And then lots of data scientists and other visualization projects. Another example I'll share in the chat here in a second was from someone who works at the Library of Congress, just did a kind of a fun project where he was, again, visually showing the amounts of our collections in different areas. So those are just a few examples, but I think we really wanted to keep them very open-ended, just to not, I mean, I'm happy to supply additional ones for inspiration, but we don't want them to be limiting factors by any means. We really want you to go, as far as your imagination will take you with how to use these assets and these data streams.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Vince, Vince and Jamie, if you feel like sharing just any quick examples, or if you could drop in the chat any quick examples of things that have been made with the assets, that would be awesome. I'm just looking at these, there's so many good questions. I'm just going to jump through these questions. So Jazz asked, is $10,000 for the beta stage of development with potential for more funding if there is an interest to expand on early stage designs? So Jazz, yeah, I mean, that's the intention. The hope is that we'll identify interactions that are exciting that we would want to consider, building out into a more production ready environment. That said, we don't have a specific pot of funding available for that yet, but the hope would be that we would, in collaboration with the creator, be seeking additional funding to expand it further. Let's see. Does Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian have existing online audience research that could be used to understand the target audience better? Along those lines, can you elaborate at all on plans to test this with live audiences for evaluation? Is that to be completed after the 10-week period or during development? Is it expected that the submitters organize and manage the testing process, or will Cooper Hewitt and its partners be guiding this process? So Kate is typing an answer, but Kate, if you want to answer verbally, feel free. Yeah.
We can post current research, I believe, in the FAQ to come. Absolutely. Plans to test this, we will be doing evaluation during the 10-week period towards the end, but that timeline is to come. I will be helping support you in that. Cooper Hewitt will be helping provide audiences for that, so that not all of the organization and management would be on your shoulders. We would hope that you would be involved in the testings to make sure that we're testing for the types of outcomes and reactions that you have designed for, right? So that it is a collaborative process in that way. But no, you will not bear the burden of the organizing and managing of that. And we want to be able to get you some rapid feedback within this. We really want viable projects.
Thanks so much, Kate. Let's see. So this will answer a couple questions. When I worked in museum production, I was often on teams consisting of a producer, writer, curator, content expert, and designer developer. Do submitting teams need to have these kinds of experience? So submitting teams need to have sufficient experience to be able to execute what they're proposing. So we have no specific requirement that teams are constructed in any one way. And also we will not be giving preference to larger teams versus individual proposers. The critical thing is that the team or individual that is proposing the project is able to create it, because we can't support the creation of the things that you're proposing outside of the teams that are proposing them. Let me know if there's more questions around that. Let's see. And then there's some more kind of, let's see, technical questions. Re-3D assets, is there a roadmap for how many and what kinds will be added in the coming quarters?
Due to COVID restrictions, we're not able to do any 3D scanning at this time. So I added a link to the models that are available. If anything does become available, I guess we could add that to a list somehow through you, Rachel, I assume. But given that we can't get in the museums right now, unfortunately, I don't see that being a high probability before the proposals are due.
We do have roughly 2,500 currently available.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Vince and Jamie. And on that note, question, should we submit a proposal that uses one or a couple of museum pieces, or should we create a tool that is applicable for a mass amount of museum pieces? So I would say that that is up to you, but I mean, my suggestion would be, you know, it should be applicable for enough museum pieces to stay interesting, either to be used more than once or to be interesting to a variety of different audience members. So, I mean, what that means in terms of judgment is up to you, but just, you know, think about the fact that this is going to be hosted for a year after the program. So if we want folks to keep using it, probably there should be, you know, it should use enough assets to stay interesting to that extent. And then are we only limited to use 2D, 3D assets from the museum? And are there any limitations on what mediums we choose to work with? So I don't know that I'd say you're limited to only using 2D and 3D assets from the museum. I mean, from the open access collection, there's like 3+ million assets in there. So if there's other stuff that you want to use, by all means, but I think it's important for sure that the focus is open access. And as far as a web app versus a mobile app, I mean, people don't tend to be super excited to download mobile apps, and they are a little bit less accessible for a lot of folks than something that works in a browser. So I would say that based on the criteria around access and, you know, what the finalists we select providing as broad access as possible, probably a web app would be better. But if you have the most bang up idea for a mobile app ever and you think that people are going to be super amped to download it, I mean, definitely propose it. We don't want to stop you from doing that. What else? Any of you guys see other questions you want to jump in and answer in here?
Maybe just there's a couple questions that deal with accessibility that are kind of positioned in a weird way. And so I would say, you know, like, what is the percentage of people with disability, like kind of steer away from that, you know, the emphasis being on inclusion. Know that 1 in 5 people in the world has a disability, and 1 in 2 people over the age of 35 will have a disability in their lifetime. Think of those large numbers. That's over 1.5 billion people in the world. So if we're not like kind of sort of hiving the audience down into ability, disability, and we're thinking inclusively, then our outcome will be accessible, and it'll be interoperable and sustainable, et cetera. So let's like try and keep that in mind during the conceptualization phase, during your proposals, and worry about the technicalities around accessibility when we're in the design development pipeline.
Just to add on to that, Corey, from Verizon, I failed to mention this at the intro, but Verizon's providing mentors for both technical, and we also have a whole team that their sole focus is on accessibility and making technology and devices, hardware, software, more accessible. So if we do get to that point where you say, hey, am I missing anybody, and can I make this this solution more accessible to the masses, Verizon is happy to step in and help provide a mentor to take you through that and think through things like captioning and bridging digital divide and things of that nature.
Thanks, everybody. I am looking at, I saw question 2, pitch the potential beyond what's being made in this 10-week period. E.g., this is a stepping stone to a bigger project that really tackles many of the tough questions the panelists are raising. So I think, it's definitely valuable to mention the long-term potential of anything that you propose. And we certainly are interested in that. I would say that, in thinking about the proposal, there are a few different sections that we're asking for. We're asking for a description of your idea. We're asking for a description of the interaction, and we're asking about audience impact. So I would say probably the best place would be in the description of your idea to talk about what that potential is. But then when you're answering questions about the interaction and specifically about the audience impact, if you really focus on what you're planning to build for this prototype period, just so that way we can really be evaluating proposals with an eye to what the longer term potential is, but also still remain focused on what's actually being proposed for this specific program. If our idea includes some sort of uploading, sharing on the user's end, what moderation will that moderation be provided by the museum, or would the submission team have to incorporate the moderation system somehow? So that actually touches on a really, really good question, which is that if you are asking users to submit or upload any kind of personally identifying information or PII, it will be way more complicated with the Smithsonian. I am just going to say that. It doesn't mean that it is a total deal breaker, but it means that we may run into some compliance issues that make timely delivery very complicated. So I would say that in thinking about how much data you're asking your users to share, or if you would ask your user to create an account, for example, these are all things that will require additional compliance review. And to answer the question directly, we cannot provide moderation. I mean, unless it's like very, very light. But any heavy duty moderation, we just simply, unfortunately, don't have the resource to support in this specific case. So I would urge you to just sort of think through, like, how can this be as self-sustaining as possible?
Can I just add, Rachel, I kind of want to go in harder on that and just strongly discourage that, just because the compliance issues that we need to face really do make it prohibitive for us to do something, I think, in this kind of format.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will absolutely share as much as we can about like how many proposals we receive. We're absolutely interested in being transparent about that. So, I mean, yeah, sure. When we publish finalists, we're happy to share that information. Corey, you're going to answer about 5G technology.
Yes, I just saw that. I was going to answer live, but
awesome.
I'm supposed to be a technologist and don't know how to answer live. So I'll just answer over the call. So yes, 5G technology is something that Verizon 5G Labs obviously focuses on, and I think that there's opportunity down the road to incorporate some type of 5G, exploring ultra wideband or 5G nationwide. For this program specifically, it's not a requirement. Anything running over 4G LTE is fine, or even a wired connection. That's not the 5G aspect is not the main focus of this program. It's really go out there, see what you can do with these assets. I think further down the road, if it's compelling, prototype, there's certainly some opportunity to work directly with Verizon or, in collaboration with Verizon and Smithsonian to really build out and maybe infuse some of those 5G, some area of 5G into your technology going forward.
Thanks, Corey. So it is possible to focus on a particular period. There's a question, is it possible to focus on a particular period, or would we need to propose a more broad use of the assets? You're welcome to focus on whatever area of the assets you're interested in. We are not interested in being prescriptive, but just of note that if you are focusing on a particular period, just sort of thinking through who the audience might be for that, and if it would be that, we want you to really target specific audiences, but also just remember that these will be made publicly available. So it's okay if your audience is specific, but if it's specific to the point of limiting, you might want to just kind of think that through before you decide to focus specifically on one period or another. In terms of mobile access, I mean, I think we're not we're not asking you to do everything in the kitchen sink for this particular prototypes session. So I would say that, if you're proposing something that would be better suited for mobile or that would be easily made responsive, by all means. But if you need to create something that's just available via desktop or just available via mobile, that's okay. We are not, these prototypes do not have to be everything to everyone. There's a question, will the app be hosted on the Voyager platform or the Cooper Hewitt or Smithsonian servers? The app will be hosted on the Cooper Hewitt servers. And part of the early stages of working with finalists is to determine hosting requirements so we can make sure that we can set up environments to be able to host. Also saw a question about grant funds meant to include expenses to maintain the project for a year. For instance, if we're running a server, then should the 10K include server costs? As we understand it right now, yes. But I mean, I think it is likely that the answer to that question is yes. I think if we arrive at a place where, for example, you're a finalist and you built a prototype and we want to pursue other avenues or other opportunities with the prototype, we may be able to figure some of that out, but I think you should assume that yes, it should cover those server costs. I'm talking a lot. Anybody else want to answer any questions? Feel free. I feel like I'm sort of scrolling back and forth.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in another little pitch for Voyager that relates to a couple of those questions. One being sort of server requirements and support costs. So if you integrate with our Voyager platform, it's something that's served from an existing server that we have at the Smithsonian. So that would be something where you would purely be contributing code and functionality to that platform. And also there was a question about long-term future potential. If you do decide to propose a project that involves the Voyager platform, we are very interested in incorporating that back into our core code. So that would, in theory, become something that would live on in Voyager. And that is a platform that we are invested in. And also more specifically, right now, we're putting a lot of work into our AR functionality. So anything that was contributed on that end would also be really great to us and would most likely make it, into future versions.
Thanks, Jamie. Anybody else see any questions in the Q&A that you want to jump in and answer?
Can I just check, Rachel, did the question, can teams submit ideas for engagement with other specific Smithsonian institutions? Did we answer that one?
Nope.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Does any of my colleagues?
I'm not sure. Whoever submitted that question, can you maybe ask a little bit more specifically? And we'll jump in there. Jocelyn, we will be compiling all the links shared in the chat. And we will also share a transcript of the program. So you'll see, but we will absolutely be sharing this. We don't want to make them hard to find. Let's see. Oh, I saw a question, and Kate is typing this, but I'm just going to say it out loud. Who will have ownership of the project? So this is a really important point. You will. So one of the sort of foundational pieces of this program is that all creators will own all IP resulting from the program, period. The only distinction to be made there is a 1-year license so that we can host the project and we can make it available to the public. But otherwise, you own it. It's yours to do with what you wish. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. What else? There are still a bunch of questions. We talked about audience research. How important is it that the experience is located as separate and belonging specifically to the museum versus something which pervades and interoperates? It doesn't have to be specific to the museum. It can be pervasive and interoperable. I mean, we will be hosting it, and there will be an indication that it's using Smithsonian open access assets. But a rich creative educational experience, which combines our collection with other materials and contexts, sounds great. So I would suggest that if that is your idea, you propose that. That sounds awesome. Let's see what else. Like, are folks voting stuff up at this point? Can a total proposal comprise multiple solutions? Certainly can comprise multiple solutions. So this is like one for online browser, mobile browser, another for offline. Absolutely. That is a lot of work to do in 10 weeks for $10,000. But if you are proposing multiple solutions and that's a thing that you feel confident that you're able to deliver in that time, by all means. I don't want to encourage you to bite off more than you can chew. Let's see. Oh, for proposal format. So we do not have a template for proposals. However, there are specifics on the site as to what a proposal looks like. And if you click on the download application button on the page, you will get to a PDF that has specifics about what you should include in your proposal and word limits, but we're accepting proposals via email and PDF format. We just have a few minutes left. Let's see. The build phase will be executed entirely offsite. Yes. Any other?
There's a question about proximity to New York or Washington, and absolutely no requirement whatsoever. You can be as far away from us as you possibly can be, if that's helpful.
Yep. And then just lastly, there's a question about more clarity on what kind of user information, so the PII. So having folks make accounts, like collecting email addresses. So this is sort of the way that PII works, and we can provide more specific info also in writing, but basically there's kind of low level PII, and then there's like really intense sort of high security risk level PII. Kind of lower level PII is considered like name and email address, for example. Higher level PII is things like your social security number. So definitely do not propose anything that asks for people's social security numbers, because we will not award you. For the lower level PII, one of the critical things is it is easier to do compliance on things that you can't correlate two pieces of information. So for example, if you wanted to have people create an account, the safest and easiest way to do that is to build a system that offers people a unique identifier that is not their email address. So you do not have to collect email addresses. So like if you've ever used GoDaddy, for example, there's a customer number. So you use a customer number to sign in with a password. So it's not the email address. The reality though is that it is, again, highly more complicated to go through privacy reviews. And we really just intensely want to urge you that if you are going to propose something that, well, first of all, to not do it if you can avoid it. But if you are going to propose something that is in any way collecting PII, that it is like for the best possible reason that exists under the sun. Because it is just really, it's a pain, to be frank. It's just a real big pain. And it's a pain that will become your pain that we would just rather save you from.
Again, strongly discourage going in that direction.
I know that there's a few questions we haven't gotten to, but I think we mostly have. And we're going to, again, share a transcript. I'm just flipping through. Is there a way to connect solo participants who want to form a team? Probably not, but I mean, if folks, if you are a solo participant and you don't have access to a team, you can email us at the resource email. I'm going to put it in again into the chat again. And if we happen to have a magical, like you email us and there's a couple people who email us to do this, we're happy to do that, but we can't really be responsible for connecting you guys. But I mean, if we can help and it becomes apparent that it's possible to help, we're happy to help. Just looking at time, I just want to make sure that we kind of reiterate the submission deadline is February 23rd, which is a Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So proposals that come in after that, so on February 24th, we cannot accept, they'll be considered late. If you have questions that weren't answered, if you could just drop them into the Q&A before you go, just so that we can make sure that we can answer them in the FAQ that we publish. Thank you all so much for coming to the panel. Thank you all so much for giving us your time and answering questions. And we are really, really excited to see what you propose. And thanks again for your time, truly. This has been a great opportunity to just hear what folks are thinking about.